Okay.
Hello there, dear listener. We hope you're enjoying this lovely discussion. If you're not already aware, this show is part of a podcast network called KWAZ Radio, a Pan-African Nationalist and Garveyite network committed to showcasing the rich and varied thoughts of African people. We have an exciting lineup of shows that we think you'll enjoy, including
the Bitter Medicine Podcast.
I think black people require too much buy-in. Like, we constantly have to sell black people on things that are beneficial to black people.
The Pro-Black Perspective Podcast.
I'm fearful that our people are not really studying how to get ahead, And we're kind of...
Learning Curve Podcast.
Sexual access has never given you economic empowerment. The only person who has ever been economically empowered by a sexual relationship is the wasp and his woman.
The Cathedral Cheek Show.
When we start rising up to fight for our own, I guarantee you they'll stop doing what they're doing. I guarantee you they would have let their brother go. They was waiting to see what black folks was going to do.
Brother Bakari Podcast.
Black people love to claim folks that hate them, right? They're a slave master, and they are ashamed of who they really are.
The Forecast Radio.
Like, if you pray to the same deity as, like, your enemy, and that God blesses your enemy more than you may want to reconsider who you praying to,
And Tanzan, African Mind.
Africans generally are welcoming of everyone. Sometimes, to my consternation, I think that they should be less, welcoming.
If you love our podcast network, we would be grateful if you could rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. Follow us on social media, like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, and check out our website at www.kwazradio.com for more information. Thank you for tuning in. And now, back to the program.
All right. Peace, family. You're tuning into the Pro-Black Perspective, obviously. Welcome. Oh, man, another week in Africa, another great week in Africa. Turn to Walter Rodney's How Europe Underdeveloped Africa. We're going to try to be quick with this. I haven't actually eaten as yet, my dinner at this point. It's actually 6 p.m. instead of the usual 11 a.m. But I decided let me keep the podcast timing, but I haven't really adjusted to in the middle of the evening type thing. But this country is just so good and so good to me. But of course it's underdeveloped, right? Well, at least according to our brother Walter Rodney, and we just have to figure that out. I'm actually grateful, I just want to say this quickly, that this is the second to last time we have to read this book, because it's been going on long, like almost 400 pages. Like, we're going to read up to 400 pages now, so that's pretty significant. Anyway, I hope everybody's doing well. Kofi's here. Kofi says greetings. I don't know how the sound rate is. Like I said, I think the internet is a little bit funky at this point. I think the internet is a little funky, but you can't win everything. You can't win everything. That's one of the things. Like, for every joy, there's a cost to be paid. Or there's a price to be paid, and one of the prices of being on the continent is you're not going to have the fiber optics like you're used to. But again, it's like I can say it this way. My son opened the door to our house and just hanging out with a bunch of other kids, you know, a bunch of kids. Now, obviously, the problem is he doesn't speak Swahili, so you know he's he's basically a bully. But at the same time, it's just good to be in an area where you can just go outside safely, you know, and you have like your little compound. So, you know, it's just maybe five. Well, right now there's probably like 5, 6 other kids, and they're just playing, riding bikes, just riding bikes and chatting among themselves. That's a good life. Now, you can have that in America. You don't really have, well, it depends on where you live, but you don't really usually have separated living compounds, like behind gates and that kind of stuff, with security guards and all that kind of stuff, unless you're like rich. And there's like no traffic, really, you know, where these kids are playing, which is really good, you know. So you don't have to worry about, oh, is my kid going to run into traffic, or is he, does he have to navigate the streets? You know, what if a driver? You don't have to worry about any of that kind of stuff. It's just kids playing with kids. Just a beautiful thing. I wish I could show you guys video, but I don't. So Kofi says sounds good to me, which is good. All right, so we know that's good. So let's go to the literature, the book. He says a European-type school system hardly operated during the first 40 years or so of colonialism. In that period, missionaries gave schooling for their own Christianizing purposes, and it was in the 1920s the colonizing powers carried out a series of investigations into educational possibilities in Africa. Thereafter, colonial education became systematic and measurable, though it approached its maximum dimensions only in the post-Second World War era. Now, again, so in my book, now this book I'm writing, it's a little radical. Okay, it's a little radical in the sense of I'm going to put forward arguments that nobody wants you to put forward. As in, is colonialism bad or is European colonialism bad? And then why is European colonialism bad? Right? Why is colonialism good? Otherwise, right? That's not something arguments that you want to know. But when I was discussing that in the book, it dawned on me that, again, the reason why European colonialism was bad is because the Europeans have no responsibility to develop Africa. The Europeans have no responsibility. So, a European-type school has hardly operated. Why is a European-type school in Africa anyway? Why do the Europeans have to give Africans education anyway? The argument is, hey, they only gave us education so that we could work for them. Yeah, that's the same reason you get education in Europe. It's the same reason you get education in North America. You think I went to school for any other reason but to work for them? In fact, that's what you're told when you're when you're trying to apply for college or for graduate school. They're saying, hey, look, what do you want to do work-wise for us? Like that's their question. They're like, what do you want to do for us? If that's what you want to do for us, you go to this. Like, what other purpose was supposed to be for the schools? It's not clear. So colonial education was a series of limitations inside other limitations. The first practical limitation was political financial, which means the political policy guiding financial expenditure rather than the actual availability of money. Okay, it means the political policy guided financial. Yeah, okay. Rather than the availability of money. And this is, I'm telling you, man, these people are going to. You don't want people who do not understand the world to really speak. You're going to want to. It's like actually like this. So I was at a restaurant the other day, right, with a beautiful woman, right? Anyway, I went to that restaurant. I was saying that, hoping that this person would turn around, but they didn't. But anyway, so I was at a restaurant with this beautiful woman, and I had so much shillings in my pocket because I don't always take out. I don't take out all the freaking shillings on the planet, right? I just take out enough, and I occasionally go back to the bank. Basically I budget myself, right? Now, in budgeting myself, right? Let's say, like I'm not going to spend all of the money I have all the time. every day. You get what I'm saying? Instead, I budget myself and say, hey, look, this is how much I'm going to spend this day, or this is how much I'm going to spend this week, or this is how much I'm going to spend this year, this month, or whatever, right? In order that I don't just run out of money. So my policies are going to be guided by financial expenditure, right? As opposed to, like I'm going to be guided by some political advisors, some brilliant economic paper, right? In Ujamaa, though, he is saying, and he's stressing to his people, right, to the Tanzanian people, he can't afford the schools. He can't afford the schools. He's talking about putting schools forward that double as farms. He's like, yeah, we have these schools, but they should also, teach about agriculture and or produce food for their communities, because we can't afford these schools. So the idea that just use all the available money on your schools, and I'm not saying that the colonists did not have more money than like if you're not colonizing technically, right? I don't know, but like technically, right? But at the same time, it's like you have to, you still have to budget. If you do not budget, and that's one of the main things I'm talking about in this book. One of the main things is that if you're not budgeting, you're gonna screw yourself. Generally speaking. So this socialist advice of, hey, don't even budget, just use all the available money. Okay, you use all the available money. Now what? All right, so anyway, the metropolitan governments and their African administrators claimed that there was not enough money for education. As late as 1958, the British colonial office said of Southern Rhodesia, until more money becomes available for the building of schools, no rapid progress can be expected. Adding full primary education for all students, therefore, remains fairly remote. Okay, it's amazing that Northern Rhodesia, with its immense copper wealth, did not have enough money to educate Africans. Now, again, you see what I'm saying? You have the copper wealth, and to satisfy your own selves. Okay? Like I said, like for instance, I have this restaurant, right? The profit from the restaurant primarily should go to me, right? Or, my family, if you will, right? That's where the primary wealth of this restaurant should go, right? The secondary wealth could go into educating school children, but very quickly, I'll have to admit that even if my restaurant could, and it doesn't, it's not that profitable, but even if it could educate other school children, the first beneficiaries of my business would be me. And so when you say, hey, look, isn't it amazing that we have there's so much copper wealth but not enough money for the schools? It's like, yeah, the primary beneficiary of any business is the businessman or woman, whatever, business person, right? That's the primary beneficiary. And so when you complain about, well, why do you not have enough for me? I didn't travel across the world to not benefit myself primarily. Okay? So whoever's in Northern Rhodes, Cecil Rhodes, is from, I think England maybe, I don't know, right? But let's say he's from England, right? Northern Rhodesia, wherever that is, I don't remember what country that is now. Maybe it's Zimbabwe or something, I don't know. But they're so far apart. He's not traveling so many kilometers and investing so much money, so much wealth, and so much time, and so much energy, and so much planning so that he can get this copper, and then with that wealth from the copper, use it to get textbooks for people he doesn't even know. He doesn't even care about. And again, that's the thing that people have to realize, that Europeans, they're not only racist, but they're supposed to be racist. It's like for instance, another example, when I'm in America, I don't do nothing for white kids. And I'm not supposed to. Nobody expects me to. The only time I do something for white kids is when a white person is paying me to do something for white kids. You know? That's the only time I do something for white kids. I don't go out of my way. I don't dig into my pocket. I don't try to get some. So if I were to have a business where I'm selling to white folk, right? I don't then take that money and put it into white children. It wouldn't make any sense. Now, if I had an abundance of money to the point where a bunch of white children were, you know, like destitute to the point where they started doing some crimes and some shit, maybe I might say, okay, we'll give you guys something. Like if a bunch of white people complained, hey, you're not giving us anything, but we're giving you so much, maybe I might give you a little crumbs. But I'm not going to be all right, so I'm making a whole bunch. Therefore, and you have to understand, like when you look at this, when you look at colonialism from an objective standpoint, then you begin to understand what colonialism was. And when you believe, and when you understand that white people are supposed to be racist, then you understand what colonialism was, what European colonialism was. And only then do you say, okay, well, we just got to get our shit together now. Okay? Only then do you start saying, okay, well, we actually need to get our shit together. Right? So we got one listener still. So Kofi, shout out to Kofi. Kofi, even though I'm in Africa enjoying myself, you know, and most people are like, hey, you know, I'm going to bed. Kofi's like, let me wake up and show Oni some appreciation. So I appreciate that, bro. But all right, let's keep going. So one cannot be certain whether the colonialists were trying to deceive others or whether they have succeeded in fooling themselves. But probably most of the confused white settlers in the Rhodesias fell into the latter category. Like again, they're not fooling themselves. You're just a fool thinking that they're going to give you shit. For they consistently argue that Africans did not pay as much tax per head as Europeans, and therefore Africans could not expect to get education and other services out of taxes paid by white settlers. This is a fundamental failure to perceive that a country's wealth comes not from taxes, but from production. African soil and African labor in northern Rhodesia produced vast wealth, but African children under colonialism had little access to that wealth for their schooling. Yeah, okay. And again, you have to understand, like what you're complaining about, and this is the thing. It's like, you know, reminds me of this tweet I just did. I said, they told me to go back to Africa. And they were right. They were right. This white man, like a lot of times we learn, hey, look, white man is just a freaking liar. He's just a fucking liar. He just lies all the time. You know, man, you know, how you know if a white man is lying? If his mouth is moving. You know what I'm saying? Like, yeah, he does lie a lot. But the thing is that about us is that if you don't understand something, somebody can tell you the truth and you'll think they're lying. You know? Like when it comes to taxes in America, you know that if you make below a certain percent of... You know, in America they say, in fact, I think it was like the top 1% pays like 50% of the taxes. I'll look up the statistic. I'm not 100% sure, but it was something... It could even be a bigger gross exaggeration. Let me just see. Top 1% pays how much taxes in America, right? We're just gonna double check because you know that's a okay. So top 1% earned 22%, and they paid 42.3% of taxes. And the bottom half, I'll show you guys because you guys are not, you know, like we don't get it sometimes. Hold on a second. Let me see if I can. Shit, if I just press this random button, I don't know what's going to show up. Let me just make sure I got nothing weird open, you know? Last time I actually had some weird song. Not weird song, but, you know. This is my book. Shaking my damn head. You're not supposed to see that part. This is just a bunch of edits. Because I was like, I don't have the other page open. And I'm not even switching. So this is taking a while. Some of you guys are going to be like, let me look at the screen now. Okay, here. So look at this. This is what I want people to realize, right? So this is America, in the United States of America. The top 1% earn 22% of the total AGI. I don't remember what AGI is, but they paid 42% of all federal income, whereas the bottom half of taxpayers, right? I might even be right? We earned 10.2% of total AGI and paid 2.3% of all. And when I said we, I don't mean you guys. Some of you guys rich, you know what I'm saying? But what I'm saying is we is me and the rest of the bottom half of U.S. taxpayers paying 2.3% of all federal income taxes. You understand? And so when we say, hey, look, I paid my taxes, right? Half of us saying we paid our taxes, we should get as much as or more than other people. The top 1% paid 42%. The bottom 50% paid 2.3%. We're not serious. So when white people say, hey, look, you know what? Actually, I might have paid more than you. Right? You know, what a rich guy might say, actually, I might have paid more. And you say, I pay my taxes, therefore I should have the cleanest roads, I should have the cleanest houses, I should have this, I should have that. It's like, okay, but you only paid 2.3%. Or you individually paid 0.0000%, whereas this guy by himself paid 1%. Or maybe not one guy. I don't know. I don't really know. But what I'm saying is that you got to just be realistic. So when white people tell you, and I'm not trying to defend white folk. I'm trying to bring back our understanding of nationalism, so that when we do it, we master. Like we do it. Like how the Chinese, they understand nationalism. So when they do it, they do it. You know what I mean? We just kind of on the, well, we should get everything. You know, this is the socialist tip right here. Where it's like, well, they said that we didn't pay as much, but and so we shouldn't expect to get as good. We shouldn't expect to get as much as they, because they paid more. And you might be like, well, yeah, they use our soil. Now, them using your soil got nothing to do with you. Now, you can say they use our labor. That's fine. One of the things we have to understand, we have to just come to terms with is this. Labor is something. It's not everything. Okay? Labor is something. It is not everything. You know, you can like I think I put it in the Book of Power, but you can sing really well. Like you can sing really well, really good. Like for instance, I could like, oh, no, I'm not gonna say that. But you can sing really well, right? You're not gonna make any money singing if you don't sing in a studio, or if you don't sing at a concert. You know, if you don't sell albums, you're not gonna make any money singing. Okay? And some people can sell albums better than other people. You know, that's why you go to a producer and the producer says, yeah, you know, okay, sure, I could sell your sound. You just got to do X, Y, Z, right? You have to realize that people who organize actually do contribute something to the wealth generation too. And so yeah, you know, the African labor, okay. But that's not like, again, that's not like to say that organizing is not a part of production or investing the capital is not a part of the production is not realistic. You know, I could build like, so basically like one of the big examples is Firestone makes tires, right? Uses rubber in Liberia and sells tires, right? So Firestone invests, I don't know how much it invested. I probably should look it up too. Like how much how much did it pay for the land in Liberia? Shit, it paid little to nothing. But that's on Liberia, honestly. But anyway, shit, that's tiny. But they're just showing you how much it paid. But as far as what I'm saying is that you can get a factory. When you get that factory, you can. Just long story short, complaining that you don't get from these white folk who set up businesses near you is just kind of it just doesn't make any sense in the real world. I get that it makes sense in an imaginary world where, you know, labor and soil, where you own the soil, I guess, and you own all the labor, and therefore, you know, you should have all the wealth. But that's not really how the world works. You know, like there's no wealth without any sales. So I'll say it this way: even if Liberians made a rubber plantation or whatever, like made a rubber factory, if they didn't sell the rubber to America, they wouldn't have any wealth. They would just have a rubber plantation, a rubber factory. You know what I'm saying? part of the wealth in the rubber was the ability to sell it to America. Because especially at that time, America was going through the automobile revolution, and everybody and their mother was getting a car, literally, right? There was like 2 something cars to every person. In that way, you can make a lot of money, and if you're selling it to Americans, it's kind of like how after France pulled out of Haiti went broke because the rest of the world just said no. Or even how Cuba could be producing a whole bunch of things, but if the world is boycotting them, they don't get anything. What I'm saying is that to think that just because you do labor, you deserve all the wealth, like it's not real. And I say that so that we can move from the nonsense or the pseudoscience to the science. So one of the emphasis of this next book is I said that word really weird, right? One of the emphasis in this next book is that we're going to be doing science as opposed to pseudoscience. A lot of what passes for Pan-Africanism is pseudoscience, right? All right, let's just read through. All right, so as noted earlier, most of Africa's surplus was exported, and out of a small portion which remained behind as government revenue, the percentage channeled into education was tiny. In every colony, the budget for education was incredibly small compared to amounts being spent in capitalist Europe itself. In 1935, of the total revenue collected from taxing Africans in French West Africa, only 4.3% was utilized on education. The British colony of Nigeria, it was only 3.4%. In Kenya, as late as 1946, only 2.26% of the revenue was spent on African education. By 1960, those percentages had all gone up by 2, 3, or 4 times, but being so small to begin with, they still remained insignificant. Since such small, so let me see what the chat. Okay, good. Yeah, you guys are back. No stream is stuck for me. Yeah. Sorry about that. Like I said, I'm using. So they have this unlimited Wi-Fi plan. Well, actually, let me just double check. I think I could actually add. Oh no, I probably can't. Let me see. So, you know what it could be? Let me just see. Alright, I don't know what to do. Alright, let's just go. No, stream is stuck for me. Alright. We're just gonna read through. What was that noise? Like 10 devices on it. All right, so hold on a second. Let me just double check. Let me see something. Alright, I don't know. Okay, we'll power through. We'll just power through. Alright, that sucks. So since such small sums were spent, it followed that another basic limitation was quantitative, in the sense that very few Africans made it into schools. In the whole of French Equatorial Africa, Chad, Central African provided education for 77,000 pupils in French West Africa, with a population of at least 15 million. A very illuminating fact that should be noted is that in 1945 there were more than 80,000 students attending independent Islamic schools in French West Africa, a number not far short of those attending French-built schools by that date. In other words, it was only in the final stages of colonialism that the ruling European power began to provide Africans in the former Islamic states of West Africa with educational institutions having an enrollment greater than the previous formal education. Now again, you have here an example where foreigners are the main educators in Africa. You see? And that's again, what are we doing? What are we doing? That's again, what are we doing for ourselves that should justify that could justify like again, like why do we want to be dependent? You know, attending independent Islamic schools. Like, why do we want to be dependents is the big question. You know, he doesn't say how many schools we have for ourselves, but how many schools the Arabs set up for us. Occasionally in West and North Africa, the French government gave some financial support to the Quranic primary schools and the madrasas, or Islamic secondary schools. On the whole, however, the pre-colonial African school system was simply ignored, and it tended to decline. Look at that. Who ignored it? In Algeria. You see what I'm saying? The French government supported the Islamic schools. Good for them. The African school system was simply ignored and declined. Okay. So what? You wanted the French to invest in that too? In Algeria, the Arab Islamic institutions of learning suffered severely during the French wars of conquest, while others were deliberately suppressed when the French gained the upper hand. Throughout French North Africa, the old established Islamic universities suffered because colonialism deprived them of the economic base which previously gave them support. As with so many other aspects of African life, what the colonialists put in must be weighed against what they halted, what they destroyed in both real and potential terms. So again, and this is actually really interesting. Okay, so in this chapter I'm writing, the chapter I just wrote, it was actually about I wrote it earlier. It was about colonialism, right? It was about, hey, you know, what's good about colonialism versus what's bad, right? And what's good about colonialism is that you can protect yourself against colonialism. Now, I want you guys to read this book and enjoy it yourself, so I'm not going to spoil it too much, I guess. But also, here's another thing that's interesting that we just read about madrasas, our Islamic secondary schools. So one of the things that I've always highlighted in my books, well, not always, sorry. One of the things I always highlighted was the need for secondary schools, secondary education. And we see that Islam, one of the biggest religions on the planet, has secondary educational institutions. Okay? Just a FYI. All right. So British colonies tended to do an average somewhat better than French ones with regard to educational activities, largely because of missionary initiatives rather than the British government itself. Ghana, Nigeria, and Uganda were fairly well off as far as colonial education went. Of course, there was a purely relative sense, and the absolute numbers involved were never large. Sierra Leone was better off educationally than French West Africa because the 7 out of every 100 children going to school in Sierra Leone before the last war compared favorably with 5 out of every 100 in French West Africa. As far as the British are concerned, their slightly superior record in some colonies is also offset by the very poor educational facilities offered to Africans in Kenya, Tanganyika, and Central African territories in South Africa itself, which was for a long all British responsibility. No, it's never their responsibility, it's your responsibility, but whatever. One limitation of the educational system of colonial Africa, which is obscured by statistical averages, is the great variation in opportunity between different regions in the same colony. In many colonies, only Africans living or near the principal towns had educational opportunities. For instance, in Madagascar, the capital town of Tanarive had the most substantial school facilities. In Gambia, literacy was high for Bathurst town and low outside. And in Uganda, the urbanized region of Buganda practically monopolized education. Generally speaking, the unevenness in educational levels reflected the unevenness of economic exploitation and the different rates at which different parts of a colony entered the money economy. And it's like, what is with this guy? Like I came in here thinking, look, let me praise this dude. And you see, this is the thing. When you're with Africans on the continent, you're like, you know what? Everything's cool. Everything's good. Well, then you read about these Africans in diaspora, and you're like, what is wrong with you? This is damn common. Like, you should expect the best schools to be around where the money is. Why would you have good schools where the money isn't? Why would you have the schools are for money making? Okay, that's it. Schools are for money making. Why would you have money making institutions for where there's no money? You know, why would I don't know an example. Why would I teach agriculture in the desert? You know, why would I teach? Why would I have agricultural? Like, why would I be a lecturer on agriculture in the desert? Why would I be a lecturer on let's say, yeah, computer science, right? Where people are using notebooks. You know, not notebooks like computers. Some of y'all are like, oh, like why not? But no, like notebooks like pen and paper. Like you have to, like, schools have practical purposes. And you saying, you know, I'm not even. Thus in gold, you know, the problem is that I don't know if you guys can even hear me. So it's like I'm here whining, like it's whining, right? And you guys might not be able to hear me, but yeah, that's a thing. Anyway, let's keep going though. Thus, in Gold Coast, the northern territories were neglected educationally because they did not offer the colonists any exports for product. Yeah, for any products for export. Duh. In Sudan, it was the huge southern region which was in a similar position. Inside Tanganyika, a map showing the major cotton and coffee areas virtually coincides with a map showing areas in which colonial education was available. It means that those whom the colonists could not readily exploit were not the crumbs of education. And you see what I'm saying? Like, okay, so, all right, so we're using Tanganyika, right? So one of the reasons why you're going to educate somebody is so that you can communicate with them. Okay? One of the reasons why you're going to, like again, you're in Tanganyika, you're speaking Swahili. Guess what? Well, actually, at that time, you probably weren't speaking Swahili because I think Nyerere brought that into popularity. But, so yeah, you're in Tanganyika. Let's say you're near Kilimanjaro, right? You're where the Chaga people are. Okay? What is the Chaga language? Let's see if I can. Let me see if I'll ask this mofo Chat GPT to give me a sentence in Chaga. Let me see. If I don't know if it knows the Chaga language, but if it does, that's pretty impressive. It probably doesn't. In the Chaga language, tell me. I cannot go to work later because my mother is sick and I am taking her to the hospital. Can I get an advance for tomorrow's work? Okay. Now, I don't know if they know the Chaga language. I don't know if I even said Chaga in the right way, right? And it's possible it doesn't because, you know, like, again, this is like, yes, look at that. It says, I apologize, but I don't have, I don't have access to the Chaga language. However, I can provide you with a written translation in English to communicate, you can use to communicate your message. I cannot go to work later because my mother is sick and I'm taking her to the hospital. You can use this English translation and seek it. Yeah, so they don't know the Chaga language. All right, so, and again, I'm not surprised. ChatGPT is basically a white guy. You know, it's basically a white guy, like a white American. But let's see. So not the Chaga language. So we'll just do Swahili because that's a popular language. Okay. I can't even read this shit. No, I'm not. Sorry, not shit. But it's like I could show you guys, and it's not. Like, it's not intelligible for, like, I don't even know how to read it, is what I'm saying. So I couldn't even give this example. I don't know if you guys can see this, if it's too small or not, but basically it says, I don't know the Chaga language, whatever, right? Did I say, put it in Yoruba? And it's like, I'll put it in the chat, actually. I shouldn't change windows, but yeah. Let me just say Swahili language. I'll say please because I want to show you guys some politeness to the to the robot before they take us over, right? We'll just look at the thing. So basically, what I'm saying, the reason why I'm giving this little divergence is this: you go to Africa, right, and you set up a coffee farm, right? You want people to work for coffee. Somebody comes up to you, you know, Chaga language. Now, granted, I might not be spelling the word Chaga correctly, but that's fine. But even the freaking artificial intelligence doesn't understand. Why would you think somebody in 1812 will understand everybody that they come across? No, what they're doing is they're teaching these people they come across their own language. They're teaching them English. They're teaching, and they're only teaching is so many that they need to get things done. So that now this guy can walk up and he can say Huenda, Niasewez, whatever, and then somebody next to him says he's saying he might not be able to work later because his mom is sick and he's taking her to the hospital. Can he get his payment right now? And then you could say no, and they say Hapana. Okay, but that's the reason why you educate people. So yeah, they're educating people nearer to the economic, the places where it's economically beneficial, because they're trying to communicate with them and trying to get them to do things for them. No other reason. They're not trying to educate you because they think you're cute. You know, and in fact, that's I tell you, man. So another part of my book just covers everything, honestly. Well, no, it doesn't, but I shouldn't say that. That's what I said about my last book. And, you know, not to say my book didn't cover everything, but you know, just stop saying that, you know. Can you guys even hear me? Dang, I just gave a good ass demonstration, and I don't know if you guys even hear it. But, yeah, I'll show you guys the Yoruba. And so this is the Yoruba. It's like, you can't understand that. I mean, if you can't understand that, good for you. But, like, if you're in 18 whatever, and you're saying that, you know, somebody tells you this, and you only speak English, you don't know what they're saying. You know? You don't know what they're saying. So you only educate them so that, you know, you only educate so many, and you don't need everybody speaking the language that you speak. You just educate enough so that they, so on and so forth, so that they can communicate with you. Or you can communicate with them. You can get them to do things that you want them to do. You know? And of course he says, oh, it's exploitation. Okay, whatever. Right? You know, like, okay. Like, again, like, white folk, I would say I don't give a shit what you guys are saying, because you guys just complain. You guys call everything exploitation. You want me to build you schools. You want me to build you... Like, you want me to... Like, what do you want? You want me to pay for your schools? You want me to wipe your ass? You want me to, you know, give you all the technology? You want me to build shit for you? Like, okay. Get away from me. Like, I'm not traveling the world to do things for you. I don't even know... I do not know you. I do not like you. You are actually my enemies. What the fuck do you want from me? Like, that's what that's... If I were white, that would be my attitude. You know what I'm saying? I'm not saying that would be my attitude, but I would understand that attitude. You know? The closer one scrutinizes the educational contribution of colonialism, even in purely quantitative terms, the more it shrinks into insignificance. It must be noted, for instance, that there was an extremely high rate of dropouts. A large percentage of those enrolled never finished school. In big capitalist countries like the USA, there are many dropouts at the college and university level. In colonial Africa, dropouts were occurring at the primary level at a rate as high as 50%. For every student who completed primary school, one fell by the wayside. The dropouts were from primary schools because there were hardly any other type of school. This absence of secondary, technical, and university education being yet another of the stumbling blocks. Now again, they just wanted to teach you how to work for them. They just wanted to teach you to exploit you. I don't want to use the word exploit, but what I mean is like for instance, a white guy would just go to Africa and want to sleep with a black woman, or even a black boy, a black man. That's all he's educating for. As soon as you understand, like, there was this tweet that was complaining about, oh no, their, you know, warehouses are now being automated, therefore a lot of people are going to lose their job. And it's like, look, there's no such thing as losing your job. There's no such thing as losing your job. What happens in this world is this. I mean, there's no such thing as robots taking your job. What robots are doing is they're kind of freeing a job from being necessary anymore, and in so doing, you as a human being can find another job. Why you would find another job is because people with more are still going to spend it. Like, people with money, people with a lot of money are still going to spend it, and how they spend it is entirely dependent on that. And as it always was. Nobody has to pay for you to be in their warehouse. They're just paying you to be in their warehouse because they don't have machines that could do it. But now they have machines. They're not going to pay you to be in their warehouse. Instead, they're going to pay you to eat. Like for instance, like go to Dubai. They're going to pay you to freaking be a toilet. You know what I mean? Like that's what they're going to pay you to do. You're going to have a job. You're going to be able to make money. You're just going to be a toilet. If you don't do for your own self, you're just going to be you're just possibly, very likely, very probably going to be somebody else's toilet. You know what I mean? I shouldn't say very likely, but I mean eventually, probably. Eventually, that's not you down the line. Your descendants, if you're not, if you're not trying to be up to par in the competition for life, in the competition for resources. I'll just tell you like an IS is. Okay? So anyway, Africans were being educated. Let me double check if you guys can even hear me. Anyway, so the audio breaks up from time to time. Yeah, I realize it's like, it sucks. I can't do it. I think I sent some internet. So one of the problems is that I do have extra data, like extra 20 megabytes per second. But the issue is that I sent like they look to yourself. Or how many times you can send it out? And so I sent it out last night so I could hear, because my audio was messing up for the Bit of Medicine podcast. But because it was last night, I don't know if it was used already, and if it was used already, then I can't send it to myself again. Let me just double check. I think I should have 20. I think I should still have some megabytes, but I don't know. I ran out. Yep. Okay, so, but I don't think I could even send anymore. Let me just double check. Because they're gonna tell me, no, dude, you already sent to this number. Because I guess they like have some sort of, scam resistance. Like, hey, you can't keep sending to the same person. Like within 24 hours or whatever, but it is what it is. This data be going quick, but I think it's possible that because I'm sharing it with so many people, and the thing is that it's unlimited It's unlimited. So let me see. Yeah, I think that's my notice that says, "Sorry, you already sent to this person." Yeah, Jaribu Tena, which means try again. Basically try again later. So yeah, I can't. All right, whatever. It is what it is. I messed up. I should have done that before the podcast, not for the earlier podcast, but because I ultimately I couldn't even hear myself. I couldn't even use it anyway. So Africans were being educated into colonial schools to become junior clerks and messengers. Too much learning would have been both superfluous and dangerous for clerks and messengers. Therefore, secondary school was rare, and other forms of higher education were virtually non-existent throughout most of the colonial epoch. That which was provided went mainly to non-Africans. As late as 1959, Uganda spent about $11 per African pupil and pounds per Indian, and 186 pounds per each European child. This was being due largely to the availability of secondary education for the children of the capitalists and middlemen. Duh! In Kenya, what do you not understand? If you are a capitalist, you should have more education. If you're a middleman, you should have a little less education. And if you're just the clerk and messenger, less education. You're just learning the language. If you're a clerk and messenger, you're learning the language and the good morals that they require. You have to understand the rules. You have to understand the rules and how to exact rules, how to communicate rules. That's it. And I don't know why. And here's the thing I want you guys to realize. Even when it comes to in Africa, they have what's called house girls, right? Now I don't have one, but they have house girls. The house girls. So basically, if you go to school, you would receive an education, and that education may include English in some capacity, right? The house girls do not go to schools. They do not learn English. All they learn is all they know is Swahili, obviously, but all they know is how to cook and clean. How to collect vegetables or clean vegetables, wash vegetables, and wash underwear. Okay, that's it. That's the system that we're doing to ourselves. And I'm not saying that. I'm not saying it's good. I'm not saying it's bad. But what I'm saying is that's how education works. It's functional. You're not teaching, and I'm going to use a European, but they're not teaching Hegel to a somebody whose only occupation is going to be cooking and cleaning, and this is for their life. It's sad, it's a little sad, but this is for their life. Why are you teaching them Hegel? Why are you teaching them Marx? Why are you teaching them Adam Smith? For what? And this is the thing we have to come to terms with when it comes to African knowledge, and this is partly why we keep complaining about African consciousness. Is because one, we expect everybody to know Walter Rodney, Malcolm X, Marcus Garvey in depth, even though there's no practical reasoning to know them, right? But two, we expect these white people to tell us this. We're like, they never taught us about. Why are they telling you about that? This white boy, look at me, for instance. This white boy gave me an opportunity to be an astrophysicist. That's all. That's it. He didn't want me to be no political guy. He didn't want me to be no philosopher. He didn't want me to be doing this podcast. He doesn't reward me for doing this podcast. He says, look, okay, you know what, Oni, you're actually good at math. You want to be an astrophysicist? Okay, here's the resources to become an astrophysicist. And when you're becoming an astrophysicist, he doesn't care if you're learning poetry. He doesn't require that you learn poetry. Now, you do have to take some liberal arts classes because liberal arts is a good foundation for a human being, and I agree, it is. But as far as functionality is concerned, like when it comes to what are the required classes versus what are the elective classes, yeah, like it's like yeah, and of course, in order for me to take those elective classes, I have to pay out of my ass. You know what I mean? I have to pay out of my ass. That's why I could take those elective courses. But like when it comes to the people here, you're talking about clerks and messengers. They're not going to pay out of their ass. They're not paying anything. They're receiving free education. So he's not going to give them, oh yeah, here's your Walter Rodney. For what? You're a clerk and a messenger. And he knows this. So what do you... All right, whatever. Let's not... Because another thing is that you guys might not even to hear me. So it's like, I'm just there. Blah, 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 blah. It's like... that sucks. Anyway, but I think it should be better next week, possibly. I'm not 100% sure, but it should be. In Kenya, the discrimination was worse and the number of European children involved was high. In 1960, more than 11,000 European children were attending school in Kenya, and of those, 3,000 were receiving secondary education. The settler colony of Algeria displayed similar characteristics. Only 20% of the secondary pupils in 1954 were denoted as Muslims, which meant, in effect, Algerian as distinct from European. Other minorities also did better than the indigenous population. For instance, the Jews in North Africa, and especially in Tunisia, played the middleman roles, and their children were all educated right up to secondary standards. Yeah, of course. And that's what I'm saying, of course. You're supposed to educate your own. Because, like I said, liberal arts is generally considered a good thing for an individual to study and to learn. Right? Mathematics, reading, so on and so forth. These are algebra. I'm sorry, I just said mathematics. So it's arithmetic and geometry, astronomy too, which is ironic, right? Music. These are good things to learn as an individual. There's 7 liberal arts, but there's good things to learn as an individual. But again, at what cost? So for your own children, you will put in the requirements for them to be well-rounded individuals. For the translators, you just teach them how to be translators. The thing that a lot of us don't realize is that in Africa, we were just the translators. Like we were educated to be translators. You give them nice names like clerks and messengers. You were like, can you imagine? Like, do you see what I'm saying? You give them nice names like clerks and messengers. They were just translators. A clerk translates written words. A messenger translates spoken words. That's it. But anyway, African countries without a big white settler population also had racist educational structures with regard to opportunities at all levels, and especially opportunities for higher education. In Senegal in 1946, the high school had 723 pupils, of whom 174 were Africans. Later on, it served the whole of French West Africa, and yet in the 1950s, on the eve of independence, more than half of the university students were French. Duh. Who put up the university? Like, who put up the university? I don't understand. And the thing is that you guys go into university, you see that somebody, like, you see a big building, and people will say, oh yeah, you know who, like, it has a name on it, and who's the name? Some guy put it together. I remember, for instance, when I was applying for a scholarship to university, it was a scholarship made by some wealthy African American who was like, I want African Americans to receive this scholarship. Like, that's what he said. He said, I want African... Like, that's what people do. They say, look, I'm going to give back to my own people. This African American did it. What do you think, these white folk are not going to do that? Oh, no. The thing is you want these white folk not to do it. You know, and part of it is, well, because they're exploiting our labor. Okay. They don't care. Even though it had 13 million people, education. Okay? Those are the really, really important people in any society. And so you see the Congo had only 16, whereas Japan had thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, right? So Japan, you know, I don't know if it had 13 million people, but whatever amount of millions of people it had, was able to get stuff done post-colonization, as opposed to Congo, which was like, you know, which was still had a lot more to do. Double check the comments. Bit of Medicine says no sound.
And, you know, I don't know if that...
Nah, I think my internet is a little funky. I'm not going to hold you guys. I'm rationing it, I guess, and I don't know. Like, I think I'm best... it's just a little funny. I don't have a permanent address, per se, so I don't have home internet like that, you know? Educationalists often refer to the educational pyramid, comprising primary education as the base and going upward through secondary teacher training, higher technical... Often refer to the educational period, comprising primary education as the base and going upward through secondary teacher training, higher technical, and university facilities, the last named being so small that it could be represented as the point of the top of a pyramid. Throughout Africa, the primary base was narrow, and yet the primary slope shallowly, because so few of the primary students could continue beyond that level. Only in certain British colonies was the pyramid really completed by significant higher and university education. West Africa had Ashimoda and Yaba colleges, apart from Furo Bay, which was at university level. Ibadan and University of Ghana also came into existence some years before the end of the colonial regime. In the Sudan, there was a Gordon College, which evolved into the University of Khartoum, and in East Africa, there was Makerere University. The following data for the year 1958 could be used to illustrate the educational pyramid in southern Rhodesia, where African education was not well favored. Total kindergarten, of whom only 13 made it to standard 12, Form 4. In that year, there was no African graduates from the recently established University College in Salisbury, and by 1960, there were 3. The final word on the quality of education provided by Europe to Africa can be said in the form of the statistics at the beginning of the rule of the new African states. Some scholars have worked out a statistical index of education whereby educational facilities are evaluated in numbers from 0 to 100, moving from the poorest to the most advanced. On the index, most African countries are below 10. The developed exploited countries and the socialist states are usually above 80. A UNESCO publication on education in Black independent Africa said, of the population of around 170 million, a little more than 25 million are of school age, 13 million have no opportunity of going to school. And of the privileged 12 million, less than half completed their primary education. Only 3 out of every 100 children see the inside of a secondary school, while not even 2 of every 1,000 have a chance of receiving some sort of higher education in Africa itself. The overall estimated literacy rate of 80 to 85% is nearly twice that of the average world figure. Okay, so illiteracy. Yeah. But again, like, yeah, okay. But yeah, like who's supposed to make you, like, who's supposed to educate you? You know, who's supposed to educate you? That's the big question. The imperialist whites used the above evidence to snigger at Africans for being illiterate natives, and they would argue that illiteracy is part of the vicious circle of poverty. Yet the same people boast proudly that they have educated Africa. It's difficult to see how they can have it both ways. If independent Africa is still without the benefit of modern education, as it is, then 75 years of colonial exploitation undoubtedly have something to do with the state of affairs, and the absurdity is so much the greater when one contemplates how much Africa produced in the period and how much of that went to develop all aspects of European capitalist society, including their educational institutions. Cecil Rhodes could afford to leave a legacy of lavish scholarships to white students for studying at Oxford University, having made a fortune from exploiting Africa and Africans. Hold on a second. Somebody's knocking my door. Sorry. How about I hold on. Hi. Yeah, so apparently somebody was asking for something. All right, so having made a fortune from exploiting Africa and Africans, those Africans who had access to education. So anyway, so let's see. Including the educational institutions, Cecil Rhodes could afford to leave a legacy of lavish scholarships to white students. Yeah, so Cecil Rhodes, and the Rhodes Scholars, by the way, to study at Oxford University, having made a fortune from exploiting African. And again, you know, what do you want white people to do exactly? Like I don't get it. Yeah, they're gonna use their resources on themselves. They're supposed to. But right, so anyway, those Africans who had access to education were faced with certain qualitative problems. The quality was poor by prevailing at European standards. The books, the methods of teaching, and the discipline were all brought to Africa in the 19th century, and on the whole, colonial schools remained sublimely indifferent to the 20th century. New ideas that were incorporated in the capitalist metropoles never reached the colonies. In particular, the fantastic changes in science did not reach African classrooms, for there were few schools where science subjects were taught. Similarly, the evolution of higher technical education did not have any counterpart in colonial Africa. So here's something that's really interesting. Science is probably, I'm realizing in retrospect, because that's the thing about writing books. When you write books, you begin to see things, see more things, you know. I think Marcus Garvey who says, a reading man is a ready man, but a writing man is exact, right? When you write, like I think you guys should all like write, at least like an essay or something, I don't know. But when you write, I'll say it this way, in fact. So when I used to go to the United African Movement, you could be turned back if you didn't bring a notebook. Okay? So Alton Maddox was like, if you can't get into this, you can't come into our meeting unless you bring a notebook. And in addition, he would actually sell notebooks if you like absolutely insisted. Like if you were like, I left my notebook, he's like, okay, well, you buy a notebook, you know? But his reasoning, and it was really interesting, he said, look, you can't do a math problem without a notebook, without a pen and paper. You know? The notebook, the writing, actually helps you think. You know? There's this image of these European kids who were tasked with, like it's like a painting, I think. But they're tasked with trying to find out what 99 factorial is. You know, so 99 times 98 times 97 times 96, down to, 2 times 1 or whatever, right? But all of that, trying to figure out what that is, or some big number like that, without a calculator, without a notebook, right? Which is like, pretty damn hard. Well, it depends if you know the formula or something, but like who knows the formula? But you probably need a paper and pen to write out the formula. But what I'm saying is, you can have. I don't remember why I'm talking about this, but I feel like, sorry. So in my book, I decided to make a difference between knowledge and science, and it's so profound. Now, again, I'm saying this with the full recognition that I'm going to give these guys this for free. You know what I mean? Like this is in the of one of the chapters, right? So I'm giving the first 3 paragraphs of all the chapters, so it's free. What I'm just telling you guys that like I wasn't even thinking in terms of science versus knowledge until I sat down and wrote about it, and now I'm just like, oh, I see. Yeah, science and knowledge are really good angles for studying this world. We see the name Kofi inside the book, so we're gonna see. Kofi told Bit of Medicine to try reloading it. So let's see. There were numerous absurdities in the transplantation of a version of European education into Africa. When the Bemba children mentioned above went to school, they had no program of instruction relating to the plant life with which they would otherwise have familiarized themselves. Instead, they were taught about flowers and about European roses at that. Dr. Kofi Busia, some years ago, made the following admission. At the end of my first year at secondary school, and that's Kofi, right? And I became painfully aware of my isolation. I understood our community far less than the boys of my own age who had never been to school. Over the years as I went through college and university, I felt increasingly that the education I received taught me more and more about Europe and less about my own society. And of course, doctor. You see, like Dr. Kofi. Like he was supposed to be a doctor for white people. That's what he was trying to be. Eventually, Busia knew so little about African society that he proposed that independent Africans should dialogue with the fascist, racist white minority that maintains apartheid in South Africa. Some of the Alps and the River Rhine, but nothing about the Atlas Mountains of North Africa or the River Zambezi. If those students were in a British colony, they would dutifully write that we defeated the Spanish Armada in 1588, at a time when Hawkins was stealing Africans and being knighted by Queen Elizabeth I for so doing. If they were in French colony, they would learn that the Gauls, our ancestors, had blue eyes, and they would be convinced that Napoleon was our greatest general, the same Napoleon who reinstituted slavery in the Caribbean islands of Guadeloupe and was only prevented from doing the same in Haiti because his forces were defeated by an even greater strategist and tactician, the African Toussaint Louverture. Now, again, the Europeans, and they're teaching these people to relate with them. Like, I don't always work with Wazungu, as you can tell. I'm in the middle of freaking Africa. I don't need to work with Wazungu, but sometimes I do. And like, yeah, me and Wazungu, we had a similar cultural upbringing. You know, like Wazungu could bring up, oh man, I feel like it's a damn Monday. You know, haha, Garfield, right? And I'm like, yeah, I know what you're talking about. I didn't watch Garfield, I didn't read Garfield, but I know what they're talking about. You know? Or the saying, they could say, hey, did you catch Saturday Night Live? And I'd be like, no, but you know. You know? But my point being that, like, yeah, you're going through this experience like they are. You think, oh, I'm so different. Yeah, you're different, but you're also kind of, I don't know, because you're letting these people educate you. You're integrated into their culture when you should be integrated into your own culture. To some extent, Europeans thoughtlessly applied their own curricula without reference to African conditions, but very often they deliberately did so with intent to confuse and mystify. To some extent, Europeans thoughtlessly applied their own curricula without reference to African conditions. Let's see. To some extent, Europeans thoughtlessly applied their own... Yeah, without... Like, what do you mean thoughtlessly? Like, they thought about it, and they said, no, we're building schools for European children, and African kids are coming along. And it's the same thing you see in America. The schools are built for North American children, and African Americans are coming along. In fact, they used to have separate schools, and African Americans said, actually, can we go to your schools too? And they said, okay, all right, fine, but we're not changing anything. They said, oh, that's better. But... You know, they hate when you change something. But very often they deliberately did so with intent to confuse and mystify. Not intent to confuse and mystify, they were educating their own people. As late as 1949, a principal education officer in Tanganyika carefully outlined that the Africans of the colonies should be bombarded in primary school with propaganda about the British royal family. Duh! The theme of the British king as a father should be stressed throughout the syllabus and mentioned in every lesson, he said. He further urged that African children should be shown numerous pictures of the English princess and their ponies at Sandringham and Windsor Castle. Obviously, if you want to be British subjects, what do you think it means? created by European capitalists in and for Africa. The French, Portuguese, and Belgians made it clear that education at any level was designed to civilize the African native, and of course, only a civilized native could hope to gain worthwhile employment and recognition from the colonialists. According to the French, an African, after receiving French education, stood a chance of becoming an assimilé, one who could be assimilated and incorporated into the superior French culture. The Portuguese used the word assimilado, which means exactly the same thing, and Portuguese colonial law distinguished sharply between a native and an assimilado. The latter was sometimes called a civilizato, one who was civilized, because of being able to read and write Portuguese. That sort of African was rewarded with certain privileges. One great irony was that in Portugal up to 1960, nearly half of the population was illiterate, and therefore if they had been put to the same test, they would have been judged uncivilized. No, they wouldn't. No, they wouldn't. Why do you need to be literate in their language? Why do you need to be literate in their language, except for if you were to serve them? Like I said, the house girl, she's not literate. She's not literate, and nobody plans on her being literate. Meanwhile, the Belgians were parading around with the same system. They called the educated Bantu in Congo the Evolus, those who have evolved from savagery to civilization thanks to the Belgians. Somehow, the British avoided hard and fast legal distinctions between the educated and educated Africans, but they encouraged a cultural initiation all the same. Governor Cameron of Tanganyika in the 1920s was known as a progressive governor, but when he was attacked for trying to preserve the African personality of the educational system, he denied the charges and declared that his intention was that the African should cease to think as an African and instead should become a fair-minded Englishman. Okay, so what? So what? So a white guy likes Europe. Students who came out of Livingstonia or Blantyre Mission in Malawi were widely known to be black Scotsmen. They had to choose 2 European surnames and connect them with a hyphen. Of course, in practical terms, the education was all its worth values meant that the educated handful went as far as colonialism would allow Africans to go in the civil service or in the employ of private capitalist firms. During the colonial epoch and afterwards, criticism was justly leveled at the colonial education system for failing to produce more secondary school pupils and more university graduates. And yet it can be said that among those who had the most education were to be found the most alienated Africans on the continent. Those were the ones who evolved and were assimilated. At each further stage of education, they were battered by and succumbed to the values of the white capitalist system, and after being given salaries, they could then afford to sustain a style of life imported from outside. Access to knives and forks, 3-piece suits, and pianos that then further transformed their mentality. There's a famous West Indian Calypsonian who is satirizing his colonial school days, remarked that had he been a bright student, he would have learned more and turned out to be a fool. Unfortunately, you know what? Shit. So this is Walter Rodney, but there's damn. So the president of Grenada, the first president of Grenada, also references this musician. I think that music is a really important subject. It's actually one of the 7 liberal arts, and so like I said, you write in the book and you're like, oh wow, music might be really important. But yeah, I think music is really important because you see these different radicals in a sense, referencing the musicians. So shout out to my brother Arthur Zoy. He's a radical musician. Of course, my sister Asani too. Oh, and also this is a freestyle battle rapper. Damn, I can't remember his name now. But B. Dot. He's a battle rapper that uses a lot of African consciousness. So shout out to those musicians. So anyway, unfortunately, the colonialist school system educated far too. Oh, actually, Koku said he's a musician too. He's gonna show us some music. So shout out to Koku as well. Anyway, so let's keep going. So unfortunately, the colonial school system educated far too many fools and clowns, fast of life of the European capitalist class. Some reached the point of total estrangement from African conditions and the African way of life. And like Blaise Diagne of Senegal, they chirped happily that they would always be European. Anyway, whatever. There's no getting away from the conclusion reached by the African educationalist Abdul Momini that colonial education corrupted the thinking and sensibility of the African and filled him with abnormal complexes. But at the same time, he's arguing for more colonial education. It's just weird. Anyway, it followed that those who were Europeanized were to that extent, de-Africanized. The consequence of the colonial education and the general atmosphere of colonial life. Many examples are cited in present-day Africa of the insulting treatment of aspects of African culture in the colonial period based on cultural imperialism, and the fact that many Africans were the victims of fascism at the hands of the Portuguese and Spanish, at the hands of the Italians of the Vichy French regime for a brief period in the late 1930s and early 1940s, and at the hands of the British and Boers in South Africa throughout this century. The fascist colonial powers were retarded capitalist states where the government police who says that where police machinery united with the Catholic Church and the capitalists to suppress Portuguese and Spanish workers and peasants and to keep them ignorant. Understandably, the fascist colonialists wanted to do the same to African working people, and in addition they vented their racism on Africans just as Hitler had done on the Jews. So anyway, so maybe people are going to cancel Walden Rodney in the future for calling the capitalist states retarded. But anyway, like most colonial administrations, that of Italian, but then all of a sudden it's spread of the Portuguese language. Duh! You guys, I said it. I said it. You know, that's what it's supposed to be. Nothing but this is why when we talk about the education of our children, right? We're talking about the spread of an African language. You know, I say Swahili, or we can make up a language, but what I'm saying is that you're supposed to be spreading your language. Most schools were controlled by the Catholic Church and the reflection of the unity of church and state. And what's funny is this. I don't remember this. There's this guy. I never listened to any of his stuff. I think it's like, I can't remember. I think it's like, that guy. The guy who's like a conspiracy theorist, who's like, we were here first type stuff. Anyway, I don't listen to any of his stuff, but one of his videos I did want to kind of play. But I never got around to it. But I listened to like the first few minutes of it, and he was like, every nation was started from like a church or something like that. Like from a religious organization, like starts every church, every nation. I don't know to what extent that's true, but the idea that church and state should be separate isn't really aligned with the reality that a lot of these religions are like proto-states. A lot of them are proto-states. Now let me just double check to see if you guys can even hear what I just said. It's possible not, but it is what it is. But like a lot of them are proto-states, so it's like, who said they should be separate except for white boys? But anyway, most schools were controlled by the Catholic Church, as reflections and so forth. In the little-known Spanish colony of Guinea, Rio Muni, the small amount of education given to Africans was based on limiting the use of local languages by the pupils and on instilling in their hearts the holy fear of God. Schools in colonial Africa were usually blessed with the names of saints or bestowed with the names of rulers, explorers, and governors from the colonizing power. Okay. In Spanish Guinea, the practice was followed, resulting in the fact that Rio Muni children had to pass by the Jose Antonio School, the equivalent of saying the Adolf Hitler School if the region were German. For the school was named in honor of Jose Antonio, the founder of the Spanish Fascist Party. Another aspect of the colonial educational and cultural patterns, and again, he's like complaining about the schools that other people are making instead of the schools that he's making, but okay. Another aspect of the colonial educational and cultural patterns which needs investigation is the manner in which European racism and contempt was expressed not only by hostility to African culture, but by paternalism and by praise of negative and static social features. There were many colonialists who wished to preserve in perpetuity everything that was African, if it appeared quaint or intriguing to them. Such persons merely succeeded in cutting African life off from the potentially beneficial aspects of the international world. An excellent example is the kind of work done in Gabon by Albert Schweitzer, who was in charge of a dirty, unhygienic hospital with dogs, cats, goats, and chicken running around under the guise of fitting into the African cultural environment. So, let me see something. So, succeeded in cutting African life, plenty of beneficial aspects of the intentional world. I don't know what this was about, but I guess some guy was like making a hospital, but he had a bunch of animals walking around. And this guy is like, oh, that's too bad. So as late as 1959, a friend and colleague of Albert Schweitzer defended his unstyled hospital in the following terms. Now to the domestic animals in the hospital, people have been shocked by the informality with which animals and people mix. And although it is perhaps not always defensible on hygienic grounds, the mixture adds considerably to the charm of the place. Okay. If anyone wished to preserve everything that was African, if it appeared quaint or intriguing to them. So now if the white man preserves things, and I'm not saying that he should, but if the white man preserves things, it's something that we have to complain about. It's like, what do you want this white guy to do? And it's like, who cares what he wanted? He's doing what he wants to do. He's doing, like, people live their life, people make their own choices. That That's what you have to realize about this life. And this is what my book's about, honestly. But still, people make their own choices. The white boy's choosing to spend his time like this, and you're just whining and complaining. Choose to spend your own time, not just whining and complaining, but doing your own shit. Try that. Try that. Do yourself a favor and try that. Anyway. Let's keep going. The writer was a dental surgeon from New York who would obviously have had a fit if a goat or chicken had wandered into his New York surgery. He knew full well that Schweitzer's hospital, the goats, dogs, and cats, visit hospital wards teeming with microbial life of the most horrifying variety. But he defended their habitation with Africans because they are part of the culture and charm that had to be preserved. In the educational sphere, the Belgians carried out a language policy which might appeal to contemporary nationalists, for they insisted that primary education should be in one of 5 main African languages of the territory. See, now this is good. He's like, look, the nationalists like this. However, in practice, they used that apparently progressive decision to steal off one Congolese ethnic group from another and to cut the educated off from a wider world of knowledge because the missionaries translated into the local language only that which they could thought desirable. You see what I'm saying? The missionaries only translated what they like. Shut up! Like they was translate all our books. This is translate Marx. I'm just tired. I'm tired. I'm just tired. I'm sorry. I'm going to sleep, guys. Forget it. No, I'm joking. Let me stop. But anyway, we have 51 pages. Right. Translated to the local language only that which they thought desirable. The policy of mock respect for African culture reached its highest expression in South Africa in the notorious 1953, which sought to promote the differences between Zulu, Soto, Xhosa, and Venda, etc. Differences which were part of an early stage of development and which would have been transcended if there were no European intervention or if under white rules specific steps were not taken to maintain the anachronistic. I don't know what to say about that, but language policy, blah, 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 however. Because you have to translate the works that you're interested in, right? That's why you don't want too many languages in Africa, because unless you're going to translate all the works, which you can. Position that the African should be educated, the better to be enslaved. On the contrary, most of them thought they were doing Africans a great favor, and there were a few who were enlightened enough to realize that there were a scope for devising a school program which was less divorced from African reality. In 1928, even the French education minister was shocked to learn that Africans were taught that the Gauls, their ancestors, had blue eyes. In the 1920s, both Britain and France produced colonial educators and education commissions which urged greater relevance of teaching programs in Africa. They also put forward suggestions such as the use of local languages in primary school, more education for girls, and in the end, the white-collar orientation of schooling. And in the end, to the white-collar orientation of schooling. Okay. However, they seem the progressive nature of the recommendations could not change the fact that colonial education was an instrument to serve the European capitalist class in its exploitation of Africa. Whatever colonial educators thought or did, they could not change the basic fact. So again, he's not going to be satisfied. To recommend that African girls should go to school is more than just an educational policy. It has tremendous social implications, and it presupposes that society will usefully employ the educated woman. Metropolitan capitalist society itself had failed to liberate women, to offer them equal educational opportunities, or to provide them with responsible jobs at equal rates of pay with men. That being the case, it was wishful thinking to imagine that the colonial education system would take any serious interest in African women, especially since the colonialists would have had to transform the consciousness of that matter, was characteristic of feudal and pre-feudal societies. Nowhere did the cash crop economy of the export of basic ores make provisions for educated women. As in the capitalist metropole, it was assumed that the civil services was for men. Therefore, the extremely limited employment sectors in the colonies had nothing to offer educated women, and modern education remained a luxury with which few African women came into contact. Okay. Another progressive suggests, and again, so the development of Africans. In the later stages of colonial rule in Congo, mineral exploitation had developed to such a point that there was a practical need for extensive rudimentary technical skills among African workers. A few Congolese and other Congolese also received technical training of a secondary equivalent. Significantly enough, in such cases, the private companies took the initiative since the profits were at stake, and the technical schools were extensions of their production processes. However, for the most part, whatever skilled jobs needed to be done within the restricted field of mining and industry in Africa were met by the importation of Europeans. Agriculture was not carried on as a scientific industry, as in Scandinavia or New Zealand, where whites were farming on an intensive capitalist basis. As noted earlier, the production of cash crops in Africa was stimulated by the minimum expenditure on the part of Europeans and with no infusion of new technology. Therefore, when educational advisors suggested agricultural education relevant to Africa's needs, this means no addition to African knowledge. In many colonial schools, agriculture became an apology for a subject. It was a part of the drudgery of the institution. The teachers received no agricultural education, and therefore they could not teach anything scientific. Children acquired nothing but distaste for the heavy labor of shamba work, and in fact it was used as a form of punishment. Early educational commissions also... Shamba's farm. Early educational commissions also... So let me see. Is this only Tanganyika? No. But anyway, so... Early education commissions also accorded high priority to religious and moral flavorings of instruction, something that was disappearing in Europe itself. Again, so whoever pays sets whoever pays sets the tone. Like if a Muslim is a billionaire and he wants to build a school, he's gonna put religious instruction. Like if he's not a secular Muslim, he's gonna put religious instruction of the Muslim variety. The same with a Christian is going to do it as Christian variety. And a secular person might put it as a secular variety. That's it. The role of the Christian church in the educational process obviously needs special attention. The Christian missionaries were as much a part of the colonizing forces were the explorers, traders, and soldiers. There was to be room to be arguing whether in a given colony the missionaries brought the other colonized forces or vice versa. But there's no doubt the fact that missionaries were agents of colonialism in the practical sense, whether or not they saw themselves in that light. The imperialist adventurer Sir Henry Johnson disliked missionaries, but he conceded in praise of them that each mission station is an exercise in colonization. All right. In Europe, the school has long held... Sorry, this person is texting me. The school has long held a monopoly over schooling. Sorry, the church has long held a monopoly over schooling from feudal times right to the capitalist era. By the late 19th century, that situation was changing in Europe, but as far as the European colonizers were concerned, the church was free to handle the colonial educational system in Africa. The strengths and weaknesses of that schooling were very much to be attributed to the church. Now, again, you see the same thing in Japan. So, basically in Japan, whoever was the leader in Japan was like a Christian who censored pornography. Who censored pornography, despite that in America, during the same time or whatever, you could have uncensored pornography. You know what I mean? And Japanese to this day censor their pornography. How do I know that? Whatever. But my point being that, yeah, whoever's... again, people make choices. Anyway, both inside and outside church and school. So when I say people make choices, I mean if a church goes to educate people, they're going to educate like the church, not like, missionaries. And those are reflections of superstitious ideas rooted in an early stage of African development. And when something like the birth of twins could then not be scientifically explained, and therefore gave rise to religious fear. It is to be noted that in West Africa, long before the colonial scramble, many outcasts in society and persons who suffered from religious and social prejudices were the first converts to the Christian church. What was supported by one section of the population was opposed by another. And this is actually when things fall apart. I didn't read the book, but he might actually just be referencing it to it. What was supported by one section of the population was opposed by another. In the present century, the cultural imperialism of the church excited great opposition. Prevailing African customs, such as polygamy, were attacked without reference to their socioeconomic function. On the question of monogamy, the Christian missionaries are a facet of European capitalist society. For their propaganda to have been successful, many Africans accepted the religious aspects while rejecting the cultural appendages and the European missionaries themselves. Much has been written about the trend in colonial Africa known as the independent church movement. It was a trend in which thousands of African Christians participated by breaking away from European churches, especially Protestant churches, and setting up their own place of worship under Christian African leadership. Still stupid, but whatever. The motives were varied. Some independent churches were highly nationalistic, like the established by John Europeans. Revolting against the concept, one Zulu independent church put the question to the local population, are you a Jew or a Zulu? Were you there when they crucified their Lord? Nevertheless, many Africans came to accept the dehumanizing principle of alienation from self. Africans' identification with Europeans, be they Gentile or Jew, was a pillar of the informal education of the colonial epoch, or whatever. Right? Let's see if this thing is back. It doesn't look like it's back. Putting out really low data, but that is what it is. Like I said, you can't win. You can't win, and that's fine. Let's keep going. In the final analysis, perhaps the most important principle of colonial education was that of capitalist individualism. Like many aspects of the superstructure of beliefs in a society, it has both its negative and positive sides viewed historically. The European bourgeoisie were progressive when they defended their individual from the excessive control of the father and the family and against the collective regulations of the church and the feudal society. However, see what I'm saying? Were progressive when they defended against the control of the father and the family. which is like what? However, the capitalist system then went on to champion and protect the rights of the individual property owner against the rights of the masses of exploited workers and peasants. When capitalism had its impact on Africa in the colonial period, the idea of individualism was already in its reactionary phase. It was no longer serving to liberate the majority, but rather to enslave the majority for the benefit of a few. When individualism was applied to land, it meant that the notions of private ownership and the transfer of land through sales became prevalent in some parts of the continent. Much more widespread was the new understanding that individual labor should benefit the person concerned and not some wider collective. In the colonial administration, through education, as individuals, they had improved their lot and they became models of achievement within the society. Any model which checks the thoughts and actions of young and old in the society. The model of personal achievement under colonialism was really a model for the falling apart and the underdevelopment of African society taken as a whole. It is a common myth within capitalist thought that the individual through drive and hard work can become a capitalist. In the USA, it is usually referred to an individual like John D. Rockefeller as someone who rose from rags to riches. To complete the moral of the Rockefeller success story, it would be necessary to fill in the details on all the millions of people who had to be exploited in order for one man to become a multimillionaire. The acquisition of wealth is not due to hard work alone, or the Africans working as slaves in the Americas and the West Indies would have been the wealthiest group in the world. The individualism of the capitalists must be seen against the hard and unrewarded work of the masses. So again, this is the socialist ideology, right? That is, you have to exploit in order to earn. The reality is this: in order to earn, you have to sell. You don't have to exploit; you have to sell. Okay, you have to sell. That's it. You just have to sell. The reason why Rockefeller was I read this stuff a long time ago, and like right now, I'm in the middle of. Some people don't understand. I'm in the middle of Africa, where, I don't even speak the language, honestly. So it's like it's hard to remember what you learned in public school system 30 years ago or 20 years ago. All right. Anyway, so the idea of individualism was more destructive in colonial Africa than it was in metropolitan capitalist society. In the latter, it could be said to be the rise of the bourgeois class, indirectly benefiting the working classes through promoting technology and raising the standard of living. But in Africa, colonialism did not benefit those benefits. It merely intensified the rate of exploitation of African labor and continued to export the surplus. In Europe, individualism led to entrepreneurship and adventurism of the type which spearheaded Europe's conquest of the rest of the world. In Africa, both the formal school system and the informal value system of colonialism destroyed social solidarity and promoted the worst form of alienated individualism without social responsibility that delayed the political process through which the society tried to regain its independence. Up to this point, it has consistently been held that development is rooted in the material environment, in the techniques of production, and in the social relations deriving from people's work. There are what are known as conspiracy theories of history, in which the happenings of a whole epoch are presented as being the secret scheming of one group or another. Such an approach is not to be recommended in the study of Africa's relations with Europe. However, with regards to colonial educational policy, one comes closest to finding the elements of conscious planning by a group of Europeans to control the destiny of millions of Africans over considerable themselves would be cited here to illustrate how the colonial educational system did not leave vital political matters to chance, but was consciously carrying out policies hostile to the regaining of freedom by African people. Obviously, if you have a colony, you're supposed to hold on to it. I mean, I don't want to side with crackers. I do not want to side with crackers. But you have to come at this thing scientifically. Otherwise, you're being pseudoscientific. And that's a problem for me. Ever since the period of imperialist scramble for Africa, French leaders realized that it was imperative to start some schools in the parts of Africa claimed by France with a French language and culture and be accepted by some Africans, who would then identify with France rather than Britain or Portugal or some other European rival. This was particularly true in undisputed frontier zones. Eugene Etienne, a French minister at the start of the colonial era, stated that the extension of the French language was necessary as a measure of national defense. As early as 1884, there was set up in the Alliance Française as an instrument of educational and cultural imperialism, recognized and supported by the French government. The reports of the Alliance Française show clearly that they thought of themselves as an arm of French imperialism fighting so that France could entrench itself. For example, the Alliance Française wrote of French schools in Upper Guinea in the late 19th century. They had to combat the redoubtable influence of the English schools of Sierra Leone in this region. The struggle between the two languages became more intense as one moves to the south, invaded by English natives and by their Methodist pastors. As seen earlier in the case of Portugal and Spain, the spread of the language of the European colonizing power was considered of major importance. Belgium, on the other hand, encouraged local languages as a means of division and retardation. Only in Tanganyika, under German rule, was there a positive reaction to the potentialities of Swahili as a teaching language. That there was a further impetus to that language, which had already spread by trade, political relations, and personal contacts. So that's actually pretty interesting. So Swahili has a history of being one of the only African languages. Well, actually, no, it doesn't, because Belgium had the same thing. Had African languages proposed. But again, you notice that the language is spread through what I call boko, through the secondary education, through the primary education being spread. That's why you don't see us spreading the language, because we don't build these institutions. But anyway, apart from language, the pillar of cultural imperialism in most colonies was religion. The church never played as important a role in French colonies as it did in other. And again, here's the thing I want to say too. If a Frenchman wanted to translate something to me, right? No, if a Frenchman wanted to, all right, so I said my kid gets to play outside with the other kids, right? The thing is, I can't teach them shit. I can't teach any of the kids out there anything because they don't even understand me. They don't even understand what I'm saying. They don't understand any English. I just sound like googly bop to them, right? And that's okay. I'm saying that to say that if I did want to teach them, I would have to first teach them English. Or I would have to learn Swahili. But if I'm a French man coming from France as a teacher in French, as a teacher of French ideas, or a teacher of ideas, what am I going to be able to teach? Am I going to be able to teach the history of the Zulu people? No. I'm coming from France. I went to teacher college in France where they taught me about the Gauls and Napoleon and so on and so forth. And all the textbooks that they produce that I bring in are about the Gauls and Napoleon. Not about Zulu, not about Tanganyika, not about Mount Kilimanjaro, not about the Chaga, not about something like even the freaking AI, even the artificial intelligence, which can read almost everything available, does not even know what the Chaga language is. But you somehow think that some guy is going to come out of nowhere, go land in Mount Kilimanjaro, and be like, okay, let me teach you guys about your people, about the Chaga people. It's maddening, and you think that the French are just going to show up in not the French, I guess the Germans are just going to show up in Tanzania, right? And they're going to teach the Chaga about the Chaga. They're going to teach the Tanga about the Tanga. They're going to teach the I learned so many of these groups, but I don't remember them off my head. But they're going to teach all these people about their own people, and they're not going to teach about they're not going to teach about the Germans, because why would they do that? So they're going to make a textbook for the Chaga, textbook for this, textbook for that, textbook for this, textbook for that, 100 freaking groups, all because come on, get out of here, just get out of here, because you think that their education is insufficient for you. Meanwhile, you're asking them to educate you. And this was to translate. You don't even have sometimes you don't even have a written script. Like, for instance, Swahili was usually written in Arabic before it used the Latin script. Sometimes you don't even have a written script, but you want them to translate their books into your languages. And this is before the machine age. You're crazy. Before the computer age. I don't mean to call you crazy, I'm sorry, but you know what I'm saying. Real Black Gentleman's here. He says, sup, only sup. Real Black Gentleman. RBG. That's all it is. Kobe says greetings. Let's try to wrap this up. I'm starting to cough, right? Apart from language, the pillar of cultural imperialism in most colonies was religion. The church never played an important role in French colonies as it did in other parts of Africa colonized by predominantly Catholic countries. And the Protestant churches in British colonies also had a much more vital role than the church in French Africa. The explanation is that French bourgeois revolution of the 18th century was more thoroughly anti-clerical than any other... The explanation is that the French bourgeois revolution of the 18th century was more... What am I talking about? Never played an important role in French colonies as it did in other parts of predominantly Catholic churches. Also had more vital roles in church in French Africa. The explanation is that the French bourgeois revolution of the 18th century was more thoroughly anti-clerical than any other bourgeois revolution, and the Catholic Church was completely separated from government in France by 1905, after many years of poor relations. Nevertheless, when the French saw the mission schools were helping England to entrench itself in Africa, the French government asked the aid of their own Catholic Church to secure national interest. From the viewpoint of the colonizers, once the frontiers of a colony were firmly decided, the major problem remained that of securing African compliance and carrying out policies favorable to the metropoles. And again, they always had compliance. They always have compliance. And the other part where we saw that, oh yeah, some people were able to, some people felt neglected and therefore they went to the church. Yeah, that's a problem. They say if there's no enemy within, the enemy without can't hurt you. We always had enemies within. We have to come to terms with that. But anyway, there was always the possible use of force for that purpose, but naked force was best kept in reserve rather than be utilized for everyday affairs. Only education could lay the basis for a smooth functioning colonial administration. In the first place, there was the elementary language problem of Europeans communicating with Africans. Most of the times, Europeans used translators to pass on orders, but it was known that African translators seized the opportunity to present themselves and to modify or even sabotage orders. There was a saying in French colonial Africa that the translation is equal to treason, and the only way to avoid that was to teach the mass of the people French, educating. You see what I'm saying? Albert Sobral, a French colonial minister, stressed in 1914 when he termed the economic utility of educating the African masses. Several years earlier, the French had made a specific statement to the same effect in Madagascar. An ordinance of 1899 indicated that the purpose of schooling was to make the young Malagasy are already visible. So with the support of the Inspector General of the Education, the governor went on to outline plans for African education students in attending secondary school, so to become colonial cadres. Any socio-political system needs its cadres. There was the role played by the youngest age grades in Shaka's armies, and it was the role played by the Kazmal, or young communists in the Soviet Union. Being a cadre involved not just training for a practical job, but also political orientation to attend secondary school so to become a colonial. Any socio-political needs its cadres. You see what I'm saying? So when we write about Boko Waset Nakiru, we're talking about, well, the cadres would be Boko, but you see how he's saying, look, everybody has cadres. Everybody except for black people today. Everybody has cadres. The Shaka Zulu had cadres. Soviet Union had cadres. Cadres is much wider. Only in North Africa, which is heavily white settler population, did the French find it unnecessary to encourage a local elite to run affairs under the direction of the metropolis and the governor. Although even in Algeria there emerged a number of subjects called the Beni Ui Ui, literally the yes men, who always assented to carrying out French instructions in opposition to the interests of most of their brothers. Another far-sighted aspect of French political policy in the education sphere is the manner in which they forced the sons of chiefs to acquire education. Deliberate attempt to capture the loyalty of the persons who had previously held political power. And so this is the last paragraph we should read. In 1935, a team of British educationalists visited French Africa, and they admitted with a mixture of jealousy and admiration that France had succeeded in creating an elite of Africans in the image of Frenchmen, an elite that was helping to perpetuate French colonial rule. To greater or lesser extent, all colonial powers produced similar cadres to manage and buttress their colonial empires in Africa and elsewhere. So that's it for this. Next week we will finish this. We should finish this book. It's a long book, but I'm glad that we are almost over it. Oh, I shouldn't have minimized. My fault. So that's actually the podcast. Appreciation to everybody for coming through. I know that the audio was bad, but there's not much I can do about that. I have unlimited internet, but it's a little funny. So anyway, let's say thanks to everybody. So Kofi was here, and was most of the comments actually, probably like 50%. Bitter Medicine was here, obviously. Real Black Gentleman was here. It looks like at most I had 4 people. So maybe somebody else was there. Appreciation to you. And other than that, thanks everybody for your time. This is going to be the end of this. This is only one more chapter, then we're done with this book. I don't know what I should do next. I don't know if I should read again, or maybe I'll take a break. Maybe I wanted to interview, but I don't know if I can even interview because this internet sucks. But other than that, I'm enjoying Africa. Maybe I might tell you guys about that. I don't know. But outside of that, thanks so much for listening, tuning in. Thank you for your time. And of course, like I said, I'm going to release a preview very soon. So make sure you guys check that out. You can follow my Discord if you want, to keep in contact with me throughout the week. Other than that, you could drop some comments. Shout out to Organic African Paradigm. Apparently, he's going to teach a course on Pan-Africanism, and I might be one of the subjects, so that's pretty cool. one of the Pan-Africanist schools. So that's pretty cool. You guys are gonna have a radical school of Pan-Africanists. So make sure you guys check that out. But other than that, Shemem Hotep, Anku Ja, Seneb Neb, Amen, Ma'at, Dua, Necher.